Hello everybody, welcome back to Kanga TV, home of North Melbourne fans, and welcome to the round 15 review. North Melbourne 2 from 2 at the MCG, claiming a huge victory over Carlton. I don't think any of us can underplay the significance of what happened yesterday afternoon at the MCG. North Melbourne 13-6, 84 to Carlton 10-13, 73. 64 days ago, we played Carlton on Good Friday under the roof at Marvel in a massacre. It was an 80-odd point loss. I can't even remember the scoreline, to be honest. That's how much I've blocked it out of my memory. But in just over 60 days, 9 rounds of footy, the ship looks like it's finally turned and heading in the right direction. A couple of things before we start today's review. Firstly, I do apologise. My voice is feeling a little bit worse for wear and sounding a little bit worse for wear. There was a lot of celebration going on at the MCG today. I'm filming this on Saturday evening, not long after the game, so please, I do apologise for that. Secondly, I will try and get through as much as I possibly can. There is so much to cover from this game, and I want to get through it as best but as timely as possible. I will be on a couple of podcasts throughout the week as well, so if you do want a little bit more of an in-depth chat, an extensive chat, then look out for those across all platforms. But let's not waste any more time. I think we're all looking forward to talking about this one, so let's just get straight into it. Looking at the game as a whole, I don't even know what to say. It was awesome. It was just unreal. But that first quarter was a really interesting one. Neither team looked like they could really buy a goal. Carlton missing a lot of opportunities in front of goal early, and part of me feels like maybe that was the pressure and the expectation getting to them a little bit, and the desperation to kickstart the game in a really, really strong manner. For Carlton, their first quarters are far and beyond their biggest asset in season 2025. They've started games really, really strong and then have faded as the quarters go. And a big part of me kind of felt like they would have gone into that game knowing what happened at Marvel on Good Friday and thought, let's kill this game in a quarter, let's get on top of them early, and then hopefully just kind of hang on for the ride and walk away with the 4 points. And I sat there at the end of the first quarter and thought this is one of the most frustrating and one of the most, lackluster quarters of footy I'd seen from North since Good Friday. And it was really frustrating. It started in a similar manner that the West Coast game did a couple of weeks back in Bunbury. But sitting there at halftime and then three-quarter time and reflecting on it now, I wonder if there was a little bit more method to the madness that was on display at the MCG. I kind of feel like maybe North went in there knowing that Carlton loved to dominate a first quarter, and the scoreboard definitely flattered us at the end of the first quarter, I thought. But I wonder if part of us went in there thinking, let's just try and make the first quarter as dull and as lifeless as possible. And I could just be, clutching at straws here, but stay with me. I wonder if there was an element of us that thought, let's try and take the sting out of the first quarter and then start to turn it on our terms in the second quarter and third quarters and so on. And if that was our approach, it's a very arrogant way to approach a game of football for a side that, has been competitive but still hasn't been putting up wins quite like we would have hoped. But a part of me thought maybe there was something in that. And then the way we turned it on in the second and third quarters in particular were just awesome. And it was some of the most scintillating footy I've seen from North for a really, really long time. I mean, we were 40-odd points up a couple of times throughout the game. And I know all of us would have sat with our hearts in our mouths and on the edge of our seats in that final quarter. I don't know. It's frustrating, yes, but we are a team that still can't play 4 quarters of footy. That has been on display every time just about this season. Even in that Melbourne game in round 2, which is probably an outlier now as we're coming towards the end of the season. But even then, we started the game a little bit sloppy and worked our way into it. So I think for me, it's our ability to hold our nerve and our ability to sort of weather the storm. And there were a couple of times, mainly in the first quarter and the last quarter especially, where Carlton looked like they were going to get a run on. And they looked like they were really going to get on top. And while we weren't able to register a score for most of that last quarter, and we weren't able to stop heaps going back the other way, I still thought our ability to preserve the lead and to apply pressure and to still stand up in some big moments, our defence held up superbly, was excellent. And I think there's a lot of negative to dissect, but there's got to be some positives in there. And overall, we were the better side on the day. And that's what matters. There's a level playing field as soon as you step out onto the turf. And we took our opportunities when it mattered, and everyone chipped in this game. And I think the performance was mature and it was resilient. And as impressive and as amazing as that Melbourne game was back in round 2, since Good Friday, our football and our brand of football has been sustainable, and it's been competitive, and it's been really even. And we have put ourselves in the frame to win every single one of those games, and we've been able to stay in the game for majority of the game. We've walked away with 3 wins and a draw since Good Friday, and only one game decided by more than 2 goals. And that was against Collingwood, who were far and beyond the best side in the competition at this point of the season. So you just got to take that as a huge win, another massive scalp. The last few seasons, we've barely beat a side outside of West Coast and Richmond. We've now defeated Carlton, who we haven't beaten since 2021. We defeated the D's, who we hadn't defeated since 2017 or 2018, I believe it was. And sides are starting to fear us. I did a preview on Blue Abroad on Thursday night, and a couple of fans were nervous that Charlie Comben was named. And Terry said, you've fallen when you're worried about an opposition player coming back into the side for a side that's been near the bottom of the ladder for so long. And I think that's the most pleasing thing of all. People see North Melbourne now and don't think, North Melbourne. Slowly and surely, we're moving from being the hunted to being the hunting. And the confidence this group now will gain heading into the next game against Hawthorn in Tasmania, and then on to our 100th year celebration against the Dogs the following Thursday. You can't undersell what this will start to do for this football club. And I always talk about my dislike of too many unnecessary changes and unforced changes. And I don't want to discredit some of the guys who are killing it in the VFL. I mean, we've got some players in the VFL who would be knocking down the door, should be knocking down the door for selection. But there's a real beauty and there's a real confidence booster and self-assuredness amongst the group who can take the field together week in, week out. They've all got each other's backs and they're allowed to build synergy and chemistry between them. I wouldn't downplay the magic in that. And I wouldn't downplay what we're building. If you had told me 12 months ago, as I watched a 9-goal lead against Collingwood evaporate in front of my eyes. That we'd actually be able to hang on against Carlton today. I probably wouldn't have believed you. I don't think any of us would have believed it. If I had told you 12 months ago we'd be sitting here in round 15, 2 from 2 at the G, against two sides who traditionally own that ground, probably wouldn't have believed you. If I had told you 12 months ago that Toby Pink is forming into an elite defender and taken another scalp in Charlie Curnow today, I wouldn't have believed you. That Dylan Stephens has turned into the wingman that we've been dreaming of. That Paul Curtis and Cam Zurhaar were combining to be one of the most dangerous mid-forward combos in the competition. That Colby McKercher and Tom Powell, led by LDU and Luke Parker, were turning into a midfield force to be reckoned with. That one I might have believed you. We've been hopeless, helpless, and spiritless for so long that you can't help but just smile and be sitting here with pride at the end of that game. It's crazy to think that maybe a month ago we were sitting here calling for Colby McKercher to be dropped to the reserves. And being dropped to the reserves isn't necessarily a punishment. And I've said this before time and time again. Sometimes your player just needs to refine their form before they come back to the firsts. But wow, I think the last month of Colby, basically since the Richmond game, it's just been scintillating football. And you can see now why we were so persistent on keeping him in the side last season on the back of a bit of injury and just persisting with him in the side this season. Sometimes the answer isn't necessarily to go back to the twos. It's just to keep on plugging along. One of the best games I've seen from Kirch. It was a complete game from him. 29 touches, 636 metres gained in a game high, 3 tackles, 3 score involvements and 2 goals. He just loves to run and bounce the ball, that guy. And he is everything that we need coming out of the back half of the ground and through the middle. I just love the way he takes the game on, and he doesn't really let anything get in his way. He's quite fearless, I find, and I just find that he's really unfazed. He is a lethal kick of the footy, and those 2 goals were just awesome, and they came at perfect times as well. He's that real icing on the cake kind of footy, and he's the kind of guy that not only does the hard yards and puts in the hard work, but then finishes off his job every single time. I thought Colby was well complemented by the work of Tom Powell in what I thought was his best game since the Ds, and definitely in the top few of his career. He had a game high 34 touches, 5 tackles and 8 clearances with 614 metres gained, if you don't mind. I think performances like this is something we all probably expected to see from the likes of both Colby and Tom Powell in season 2025, and I guess it is a nice reminder that they aren't going to be the guys every single time, but they are there when we do need them to step up, and I thought both of them stood up really, really nicely for us today, and they were definitely 2 of our best on ground. And if it wasn't them, then it was Toby Pink taking yet another scalp in defence this afternoon, keeping Charlie Curnow very, very quiet. There were whispers during the week that Curnow wasn't going to play. He did come up match fit, and the Blues did opt to play him. I don't know how much of that impacted his day, but you can't take away from the work that Toby Pink has done in season 2025, and I think he and Dylan Stephens have taught me such a massive lesson. It's that sometimes it's hard work and determination that's going to get you exactly where you need to go. And the way Toby Pink has transformed himself into our best key defender in 2/3 of a season of football is something that really should be applauded. I absolutely love what he's been able to do. His marking is exceptional, but it's his 1%ers as well. He works so hard to lay the tackle or to get a fist in and spoil. And I just think that it's not always about being the most talented, and that is evident in the performances we've seen from him. He was delisted at the end of last season. He was thrown a lifeline and re-rookied, and he has worked really hard physically to build up strength, and he's just playing unbelievable footy. You can't deny the impact that he's been able to have on this side in season 2025. I thought he was nicely supported by Griff and Luke today. I thought Griff was probably better against Fremantle, but I did most part enjoy his game. As a back line and as a unit in defence, I think they all were exceptional. I also really enjoyed Caleb Daniels' game. I've been really underwhelmed about his season and his output so far in season 2025, but there were times in the game where he moved into the middle and he was actually in the guts, and I loved the in and under work that he was doing. It's not really a role we've seen from CD. We're usually looking to him for a bit of class off the half back, but I actually thought his work in and around the ball was really, really nice, and not necessarily for, full games at a time. We've got an elite midfield on paper, but for bits and pieces at a time, I thought he was awesome, and I thought he was really, really handy when he was thrown in there and when we did need him to go in the middle. Charlie Comben, I thought, played well, and I thought that he barely looked like he was feeling any sort of issues with his shoulder. I believe he did come off later in the game, and maybe he will need to be re-looked at, and we'll have to kind of wait and see where he lands. We've got a week until we play Hawthorn in Tasmania, so potentially he will need a little bit more time on the sidelines, but he did look for the most part right and ready to go, and I just loved his game. But the defense, like I said, as a whole, and the pleasing thing about the performance in the back line today was that on Good Friday it was Carlton's small forwards, their electric small forwards, that kind of got on top of us, and they were the ones who were really, really dangerous. But we kept Fogarty at bay. We kept Corey Durden at bay. Jesse Motlop was the sub, and he didn't have much of an impact when he came on. Orazio, he did hit the scoreboard, but there wasn't really a lot happening for Carlton small forwards today. So I think that was probably the most pleasing thing for me, is they weren't as dynamic or as lethal as they had been just 9 weeks ago. So in my mind, that was absolutely the most pleasing thing from our defence as a whole. When North made the decision to go after some experienced veterans in the trade period last season, a lot of people laughed at us and a lot of people thought, why are they doing that? But internally, we knew we needed some strong leadership, and the performances of both Luke Parker and Jack Darling today absolutely reaffirmed that decision was the correct one. Luke Parker should be in the top 5 for the Sid Barker medal at this point of the season, and hopefully he will be there by season's end as well. The impact this man is having on our team, on field and off, is absolutely undeniable. He had 28 touches today, 8 tackles and 8 clearances. The standard that he sets and the level that he demands his teammates around him to rise to is absolutely inspiring. And leadership is something that is sometimes so underrated. And in a side like this that hasn't been able to win for so long and that desperately needed a little bit of guidance, I think he has been the perfect addition to this midfield and really, really complements what we're able to do in the middle of the ground. He's hard at it, and he doesn't hesitate, and you can tell that the players around him walk a little taller when they're standing next to him. His partner in crime, George Wardlaw, was subbed off at 3/4 time, and Zach Fisher was injected into the game in the last. I was quite surprised by the decision to do that. I feel like our intensity potentially dropped a little bit around the ball. I didn't think that George's game by hand and foot was necessarily at his best and what we know that he can do, but I thought that his intensity, his pressure act and his 1%ers were really, really adding something to this game, and that's the role that he was supposed to play today. So the decision to sub him off at 3/4 time surprised me. I actually didn't think they would pull the trigger with the sub. However, I will say, to Zach Fisher's credit, what a final quarter performance from him. You could tell that was personal for him today. You could tell that he was going out there with a vengeance, and that this was deeply personal, and he almost wanted revenge on his old side. Zach Fisher had 10 touches in the last quarter, 6 kicks and 4 handballs, 1 mark, and most importantly, he had 2 tackles that resulted in 2 holding the ball free kick decisions. And in a last quarter that saw Carlton almost run over the top of us, I don't think you can undersell the performance that Zach Fisher had in that final quarter. The impact that Robbie Hansen Jr. was able to have in the Fremantle game in a quarter offensively last week is what Zach Fisher was able to do in a quarter of footy defensively for North. And I think the move forward for Fish has been a really, really smart one. I've often knocked his execution, never his intention, but his execution definitely needs a little bit of work, but you can't fault what he was able to do today. I thought he was just superb. And Jack Darling, he didn't get a lot of the footy. He actually was the lowest possession getter on the ground, but his body work is awesome. He went off in the first minute of the game for 2/3 of the first quarter. He was bleeding from his calf and he looked to sort of be hobbling a little bit. And I felt like his presence was actually missed. It threw Larky into the ruck to chop out for Sherry, and then it maybe forced a bit of an imbalance going forward. So that's probably something that we need to monitor and we need to address and look at if he is taken out of the game at any point. He's a veteran, he's 33 years old, he just had his birthday a couple of weeks ago, so keeping him on the ground is definitely to our benefit rather than to our detriment. But it was that goal in the second quarter that sort of started the chain. It was the party starter in the second and third quarters, and like I said, I don't think that what they do off the ball can be knocked, and I don't think that you can undersell the little things and the impact that these players are having. Jacob Constanti is another one. He only had 9 touches, but he had 5 tackles and 18 pressure acts, and I thought what he actually did without the ball in hand was more damaging than what he did with it. I love his intent, I love his hunger, and we need more guys like that around the footy, especially when you reflect on the first 6 weeks of the season. Defensively as a whole, we just fell apart. We had not a defensive bone in our body, and North, going into that Good Friday game 10 weeks ago, we were in the bottom 4 in the competition for defense, and defense all around the ground. So it is as important to have guys like that on the side than it is guys doing great things with ball in hand. Speaking of doing nice things with ball in hand, I absolutely loved Harry Sheasel's goal in the third quarter. I thought it had to be Harry and it had to be him to be able to get involved and, have an impact on the scoreboard. I think it was Harry and it was LDU who got us going in the second quarter, and I know that we have such high expectations of both of them, and I thought that while later in the game it was Kirch and Powell and Parker, I thought that in that second quarter when we started to shift gear and we sort of started to rise a little bit, it was the two of them who got us going. They had 60 touches between them. LDU had 7 clearances and Harry for 1. 7 tackles between them as well, and of course that goal from Harry, and almost the game breaker from LDU late in the third as well. I thought they were both superb, and I thought both of them can hold their heads up high because I loved the game from both of them. There are moments in games where players rise to the situation when it demands of them, and for North as a team we're still learning how to play 4-quarter footy, and so it's inevitable that that would flow on to our players as well. So I think both of them, like I said, was so important in the second when we did start to get on top, and they were the ones feeding the ball to Bull, they were feeding it to Larky, they were feeding it to Paul Curtis. I loved what they were able to do. I thought Larky definitely looked a lot more lively up forward. He probably would have preferred to hit the scoreboard a little more than he did throughout the game, but I absolutely loved his marking in particular. I thought that he was really strong. We often criticise Suv for being a little bit soft and maybe a little bit weak when the ball does come into our forward 50, but I thought he held his ground really, really firm today. And I thought that Paul Curtis, while he wasn't as accurate and as sharp shooting as we usually see from him, I thought he was great. And I absolutely loved his game as well. I can't speak highly enough of what the side was able to do as a 23. And like I said earlier in this video, I think there is so much value in keeping the group together, keeping them motivated as a unit, and really reward for effort, because we haven't put too many feet wrong in the last 9 weeks. And that, I think, is largely due to us backing ourselves in. If you start making unnecessary changes, too many unnecessary changes, you're not going to tinker with what today was almost perfection and what has been some of the best footy and most consistent footy we've put together in an extended period of time for quite some time. So I think it's a really, really nice reminder. Every single player out there for North Melbourne today had their moment in the sun and together combined for what I think most of us will remember as a famous victory. I wanted to finish off this video touching on the last quarter because we were so close to letting another one slip, and I don't think that anyone can ignore that. We were 46 points up late in the third and barely let out a whimper in the final quarter. But as a side, we're still learning and we're still building and we're still growing together. And it blows my mind sometimes the expectation of supporters and the way we just don't live for the now. There's something so special happening at this football club at the moment, and it's been a very long time since you can enjoy large patches of football and let that continue on after the siren. Of course, it was disappointing the way the game ended, and I don't think that many of us will be watching the replay after three-quarter time when we sit down and start to look back on this one as the hours and the days go on. But we've been terrible for so long, and this club has been through so much, and the support has been through so much. Just enjoy it. Football is a roller coaster ride, and often North supporters find themselves heading to the bottom more often than not. So I just encourage you to enjoy it. Lap it up. Lap up the wins however they come. I don't want to sit here and gloat about a 6-point loss to Fremantle or the fact that we were a kick away from Essendon or that we were able to draw with the Lions. We're a proud football club. And if we ever want to see this team succeed, then it's got to go beyond a competitive performance. It's got to be 4 points in the bag. And that's what we did this afternoon at the MCG. So celebrate it, enjoy it. I have no doubt all of us will be celebrating together, not just today and not just tomorrow and in the week to come. I'd love to hear from you guys. What did you think of the game? Were you there? Did you have the best time ever? Leave all of your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue the conversation over on socials as well. Kanga TV show on Instagram, Facebook, X, and email. I will be back in the next couple of days with some very, very special videos as we look ahead to what is going to be a very interesting clash against Hawthorn in Tasmania. But that's too far away. I just want to enjoy this for a little bit longer, and I hope you guys do as well. Go Roos.